Deep in the heart of Appalachia, a family was bound by a secret so dark, it defied every law of God and man. This is not a story of poverty. This is the story of a twisted kingdom, built on a secret that festered in the shadows, a secret that fed on silence. In the mist-shrouded hollows of eastern Kentucky, the Appalachian Mountains don't just keep secrets, they bury them. And there, in the 1950s, in the remote, suffocating valleys of Harlan County, the Blackwood family was weaving a bloodline so tangled, its consequences would curse future generations. This wasn't just a home, it was a sovereign nation of one, ruled by a single, unyielding will. Far from prying eyes and civilized judgment, their weathered homestead stood, a property spanning 50 acres of dense, unforgiving woodland. To any casual observer, it was a picture of simple rural poverty. But the walls of that house didn't just contain horrors, they breathed them. What happens when a father's control becomes a son's inheritance? The answer lies in a secret the Patriarch called family sharing. The year was 1953 when the first, uneasy whispers began to slip from the general store in a town 15 miles away. It wasn't just gossip, it was a low current of fear. Whispers of children with vacant stares who never saw the inside of a schoolhouse. Whispers of a woman who seemed to age a decade with each passing year. And they all led back to the Patriarch, Elias Blackwood, a man of 52 years, carved from oak and iron, with a voice that didn't ask, but commanded. When Elias spoke, a former sheriff would later recall, his own voice trembling, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. He wasn't just their father, he was their God. At the center of this gathering storm was Martha Blackwood. Old photographs, faded and brittle, show a ghost of a girl, a once vibrant beauty of 16, with dark hair and eyes that sparkled with a light that hadn't yet been snuffed out. She arrived as a bride in 1938, a transaction to settle a debt. By 1953, at just 31, she was a hollow vessel. Neighbors who glimpsed her on rare, monitored trips to town described a woman who seemed to have been erased from the inside out, her gaze forever fixed on some distant, private hell. She had borne 6 children. But the darkest secret of Shadow Creek Hollow, the one that would poison everything, was the unholy trinity of Martha, Elias, and their eldest son, James. He was groomed not to lead, but to share. The son would become the father's mirror in a crime against nature. James Blackwood was his father's creation. Where Elias was a roaring fire, James was a banked coal, quiet, watchful, but capable of a sudden, destructive heat. From the time he was just 14, Elias began his work. It started not with force, but with words. A slow, insidious drip of poison, framing a monstrous act as a sacred rite of passage. "This is what makes you a Blackwood man," he would tell the boy in the dark of their cabin. "This is our way. This is how we keep the blood strong." He was being sculpted, his moral compass shattered and reassembled to point only to his father. Court records would later reveal the horrifying reality Elias called family sharing. It was a system, a schedule of violation that forced Martha to accept both father and son as conjugal partners. This wasn't a fleeting sin, it was a sustained, institutionalized horror within those four walls. It resulted in 3 young children who would forever bear the physical and emotional scars, their very existence a question mark of suffering. Were they James's siblings, or his children? The ambiguity was a living nightmare. But every kingdom has its rebels. The secret that held this family together would be shattered by the one person brave enough to run. The truth did not come from a sheriff's investigation, but from the raw, desperate courage of 15-year-old Sarah Blackwood. She was the eldest daughter, and in her, a spark of understanding had somehow survived. She remembered a different world, glimpsed during a rare childhood visit to an aunt, a world with laughter and kindness, a world without fear. That memory became a weapon. In the dead of an April night in 1953, with a moon that felt like a watching eye, she fled. She didn't just walk, she clawed her way through 20 miles of rugged, unforgiving terrain. Thorns tore at her clothes, the cold seeped into her bones, but the terror of what lay behind her was a greater force than anything nature could conjure. She finally collapsed, a bundle of rags and bones, on the steps of a Pineville church. The reverend who found her said she looked up with eyes that had witnessed the end of the world, and uttered 7 words that would break his heart: "Please don't make me go back there." Her testimony, whispered through tears, painted a picture so grotesque it was almost unbelievable. It would launch one of Kentucky's most shocking legal cases. But back at the homestead, a storm was brewing that would make the authorities' arrival anticlimactic. The cage was shaking, and the beasts within were turning on each other. The delicate, toxic ecosystem of the Blackwood home was collapsing. James, now 24 and 10 years into the arrangement, had begun to change. The quiet son was finding his voice. He started to refer to the youngest children as his. He began to challenge Elias over Martha's treatment, her failing health. The arguments, once stifled by sheer terror, now echoed through the hollow. Sarah later told investigators, "Pa would get real quiet when James talked like that, which scared us more than when he yelled." It was the quiet before the storm. The catalyst was illness. When 4-year-old Joseph fell burning with fever, James insisted on a doctor. Elias refused, citing his traditional remedies. The argument exploded into a physical confrontation, Elias striking his grown son with a leather belt, a symbolic act of dominance that shattered the last vestiges of their twisted bond. What followed was a primal, brutal fight for dominion. It wasn't a fist fight, it was a slaughter. James retreated to the barn, Elias following, both men arming themselves with the tools of their harsh livelihood. The scene investigators would later find was one of almost animalistic fury. 2 generations of Blackwood men, Sheriff Wilson would somberly note, had nearly torn each other apart. And for what? For the right to claim a woman they had both broken. When authorities finally arrived on May 5, it was not to arrest, but to witness the aftermath. Elias was dead, his kingdom ended by the son he created. James was clinging to life, unconscious and broken. Martha was found in a catatonic state, her mind having finally fled the prison her body could not. The younger children were discovered in a root cellar, where they had huddled for nearly 3 days, surviving on raw potatoes and the condensation from the earth walls. If you value the historical truths that society tries to suppress, the stories that make us question the very nature of evil, then make sure you're subscribed. This channel is your only window into the forgotten tragedies that forged our nation, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. The media frenzy was a spectacle of its own, lurid, cruel, and devoid of the profound human tragedy at its core. Headlines screamed about a shared wife and a fight to the death, reducing a multi-generational nightmare to a backwoods scandal. The surviving Blackwoods were scattered, their lives irrevocably shattered. James was convicted of manslaughter, a man so shaped by his upbringing that the outside world had no place for him. Martha was committed to an asylum, where she would live out her days as a ghost, occasionally asking after children she would never see again. The children, particularly the youngest three, bore the visible, devastating marks of their genetic origins: congenital heart defects, developmental delays, a biological testament to the cost of the secret. The echoes of a single gunshot in a remote hollow still resonate today. Type, "Some family secrets should stay buried," in the comments below if you feel the weight of this tragedy. The legacy of the Blackwoods is a grim, enduring lesson. It's a story that screams into the void about the dangers of absolute isolation, the catastrophic failure of community vigilance, and the terrible, tangible price of forbidden bonds. The child protection services, the mandatory reporting laws we have today, they were forged in the fire of tragedies like this one. They are a direct response to the darkness that was allowed to fester, unchecked, in Shadow Creek Hollow. The most dangerous predators are never the strangers lurking in the shadows. They are the familiar figures who rule the light, whose power goes unchecked by those too afraid, or too willfully blind, to see. If you have watched until this very end, leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end." Share this video with someone who believes that the only way to conquer darkness is to shine the most unforgiving light upon it. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these forgotten chapters. Because understanding this darkness is the only way to ensure it never takes root again.